I'm about to be feral on the waiver wire. I'm about to be a freaking honey badger out there hunting these wide receivers. I'm going to give you the guys that you can drop. I'm going to give you the players that you should ignore. And I'm going to give you the guys that could actually win leagues because it's the best week we've had specifically for wide receivers all season. Now, the first player you should drop, you should have never had him on your team in the first place. Jahan Dotson going into the bye. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith will be good to go coming out of the bye. But yeah, with Dotson, he's not worth the start even without the other two receivers in the lineup. So for the love of God, if you have him, send him to the waivers. I'm going over to our next player. Demario Douglas is actually someone I took in a few underdog drafts, but in your regular redraft league, there's no reason to roster him. Jalen Polk will be a wide receiver we talk about later on as an ad. Polk does look like he's taking over as the wide receiver one. You see the snap rate dip for Demario Douglas down to 59% this past week for the New England Patriots with some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL. So yeah, no reason to roster the wide receiver two in the worst offense in the league. Rashad Bateman, definitely not in the worst offense in the league, but he's the wide receiver two in the lowest volume passing offense in the NFL, where we know the Baltimore Ravens are just running the ball. Yes, he does maybe come close to receiving touchdowns called back. I don't really care with Bateman. You have one game this year with double-digit points. With Bateman, you're averaging fewer than 4 targets per contest, and we know the Ravens are going to be looking to run the ball, plan A. Plan B probably involves a lot more Zay Flowers and maybe a little bit of the tight end position. Now, going over to Jonathan Mingo, if you ever picked him up thinking, oh, is it Leggett? Is it Mingo? We know it's Leggett. We'll talk about him later. You can go ahead and you can cut Jonathan Mingo. I'm going over to Greg Dortch. It does seem that Michael Wilson, player we'll talk about in just a second, actually cements himself as the wide receiver two in Arizona. You should have Trey McBride coming back in this next week. So Greg Dortch is somebody that's easy to let go, send back to the waiver wire. You haven't seen another week of double-digit points since week 1. Now, going over to our next guy, Jalen Naylor, you have Jordan Addison obviously coming in. Jordan Addison takes over as that wide receiver two. We had Naylor as a drop last week. And yeah, he scored a touchdown every week through the first 3, but there's just not going to be enough production to go around to support Jefferson, Addison, and Naylor. Naylor's for sure the odd guy out. Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson are both going to be drops as well. Now we'll talk about what this means for the other receivers like Jordan Whittington as well as Tutu Atwell later on, who will be ads. But it does look like Demarcus Robinson over the past 3 weeks is averaging slightly fewer than 4 targets a game. Tyler Johnson over the past 3 weeks is averaging slightly fewer than 3 targets per game. So yeah, neither guy is the number one option for Stafford, and neither of them are particularly talented enough to be viable as depth pieces. Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks, out of all the players on the drop list, these would be the guys that I'm willing to hold on to the most at wide receiver, simply because, 1, I think that Dak Prescott should be a high volume passer, and 2, this is a very empty depth chart behind CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver. Now, my thought process here is, if you go through and look at the amount of players that are touching the football in the Dallas Cowboys offense, it is spread out across so many different names. This is not like the Jets. This is not a highly concentrated offense where you have 5, 6 skill positional players touching the ball every week. No, you're a lot closer to 12 to 13 in Dallas. And Jake Ferguson actually has a relatively high target share in this offense since coming back in 2 weeks ago. If you're going to look at Brandon Cooks over the past 3 weeks, this is a wide receiver that has yet to crack 4 points. Since week 1. And obviously, we had all the concerns with Brandon Cooks coming into this year. 31-year-old wide receiver that you had seen the yards per route run dramatically fall off over the past 3 seasons. And then with Jalen Tolbert in weeks 2 and 3, he does give you the random pop. You get the receiving touchdown in week 3 and week 2. He does have a lot of volume with 9 targets, but that's the game that you had no Jake Ferguson in. So with Ferguson going into the future, I think that he is going to be the quality number 2 option behind CeeDee Lamb in this offense. And they are going to be spreading the ball out to so many different players that I don't know if Tolbert or Cooks should be viable. And then Mike Gesicki at tight end will be a player to consider dropping. I actually have a waiver wire tight end at the end that I would 100% drop Gesicki for. If you are looking at Mike Gesicki, you do have fewer snaps than Eric Hall Jr. Now, of course, this was kind of the concern that you had with Gesicki all year now, where if you were looking at the tight ends in Cincinnati, they're running a rotation. While Gesicki had volume through the first 3 weeks, it's not like he was the only tight end getting involved in this offense. Now you have the rookie tight end continue to expand his role. You have T. Higgins obviously locked and loaded as the wide receiver too, and you should be seeing fewer targets going to the tight end position overall. I did move Gesicki down to our tight end 23 in our rest of season ranks. Now let's move over to the players that I'm going to classify as holds. These are guys that if you didn't like them enough a week ago to pick them up off the waiver wire, I don't think you should look at them this week. But if they're on your bench, I don't necessarily think that you need to drop them. Now, Yoshi Vosh will be our first player to talk about. Yes, he crushes in weeks 2 and 3, primarily off of touchdown volume, not necessarily target volume. Because this should be one of the best offenses in the NFL in Cincinnati, and it should primarily just be funneled through these options at the top, with obviously Chase and Higgins seeing the vast majority of it. I don't want to say you should drop Yoshi Vosh just yet, but another week where we see 5 or fewer targets, you probably go ahead and let go of him. Michael Wilson is a player that I think you hold on to your roster if you have him right now. I mean, he did lead this team in targets this past week. Obviously, he loses the fumble. It's a good matchup against Washington where he doesn't do much. Trey McBride is coming back into this offense. So if you didn't like Michael Wilson in week 4, there's no reason for you to pick him up in week 5. But if you already had him on your roster, I'm fine with you holding him. I'm definitely, when you look at the rest of season rankings that we have on the site, you can just see, oh, okay, Mason has Michael Wilson ranked wide receiver 61 rest of season. And then we get some of our pickups where you'll see, oh, okay, Mason has Dontavian Wicks up there at wide receiver 43. Obviously, if you have Michael Wilson, you drop him for Dontavian Wicks if he is active. I just don't think you absolutely have to drop Wilson. But of course, if you wanted to check out those rest of season rankings, they are over there on flockfantasy.com. You can always check out the updated rest of season ranks, the weekly ranks, and the dynasty rankings, all for free on flockfantasy.com. Plus, you can use the trade calculator for free, which actually takes into account your exact league settings to give you the most accurate results we possibly can. Plus, you can use the trade finder for free, where you can go through and you could say, oh, okay, I kind of want to trade away Jordan Addison. What can I get? You throw Addison into the trade finder and you see every trade that's been made in real fantasy football leagues. That's included Jordan Addison. And then also you can actually link your team and your league to flockfantasy.com for free with Sleeper, ESPN, or Yahoo. And from there, you can see power rankings and how our rest of season ranks would rank every single team in your league. So definitely take advantage of that. I'll leave a link in the description and link in the comment section if you want to. But let's move this over to our next hold. Quentin Johnston, if you're in a deeper league, I would hold. You're going into the bye week, so it does kind of suck. Definitely want to be on record. Ladd McConkey is the wide receiver 1 here. Ladd McConkey has dominated the target volume through the first 4 weeks. Quentin Johnston has had a decent amount of touchdowns. He scored 3 touchdowns off of 18 targets. So you're having 1 touchdown every 6 targets. That's not sustainable. That's going to come back down to earth dramatically. But I do think that you should also see maybe the passing volume come up here a bit as Justin Herbert gets healthy coming out of the bye. And then Gabe Davis is somebody that I think you should go ahead and hold on to. Gabe Davis dealing with an injury all week at practice. Obviously, week 4, he does look really bad. He has yet to hit double-digit targets this season. But if he does get back to being fully healthy and Lawrence looks a little bit better, I think Davis still, I can justify having him on your roster. I currently have him ranked at wide receiver 64 in our rest of season ranks. Zach Ertz, definitely hold on to him still. He saw 3 targets this week, averaging exactly 4 targets a game so far this season until we end up getting Ben Sinnott with a little bit of a larger role. Zach Ertz is tied in consideration every week. And Cole Kmet definitely looks a little bit less appealing with Keenan Allen in here, where he falls from 11 targets down to 3, but he actually plays a season high 90% of the snaps for the Chicago Bears. So Kmet 100% still worth the spot on your roster. And we actually have moved Cole Kmet in our rest of season rankings over both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, where Kmet now is tight end 15. And honestly, I need to move him over Cade Otton. He will be tight end 14 in these rest of season ranks. But let's move over to the wide receiver pickups. I'm going to rank these from most appealing to least appealing. Obviously, the guys near the least appealing will probably be available in every single league. The guys with the most appealing will be available in only a few. But Dontavian Wicks right now is actually only rostered in 18% of leagues. Now, in the Flock League right now, Corey has him. Pisses me off because I would be willing to spend some serious fab to bring in a wide receiver that I do believe can be a consistent spot starter for you in the flex spot moving forward over the next month. You have no Christian Watson, which actually does jump Dontavian Wicks up to see a season high 76% of the snaps here for the Green Bay Packers, We talked about this with Jayden Reed being the buy low candidate last week, but the expectation is with Jordan Love coming back into this offense, you should be near the top of the NFL in total passing volume. Now, do I think Jordan Love's going to have 50 passing attempts every single week? Probably not, right? But it's going to be a high volume, good offense. Dontavian Wicks looks to be close to an every down player. He sees 13 targets, which leads this team the past week. You have 2 touchdowns coming off of these 13 targets. Extremely young player going into year 2 that did have an efficient rookie season campaign as well. It seems like Christian Watson may be a candidate for the IR. So I have moved Dontavian Wicks up to wide receiver 43 in our rest of season ranks. I know maybe this seems a little bit low, but if you look at the players that we have him alongside, I'm alongside Michael Pittman Jr., Jordan Addison, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir. There's just a lot of good wide receivers. So when you see a blank wide receiver ranking, it looks like it's low, even if I don't think it is. Xavier Legette is the wide receiver that it's either him or Ricky Pearsall. We'll talk about Pearsall later on. That I have the most money spent in underdog drafts drafting this year. And your boy is coming out as a champion because of Legette. Legette this week gives you the receiving touchdown. He has double-digit targets with 10. And back-to-back weeks now, the Carolina Panthers look like a capable offense under Andy Dalton. Looking at their game against the Bears in week 5, you actually have an over-under of 45.5 points. So sportsbooks are telling us that, yeah, the Carolina Panthers, they will continue to be a decent offense going into the future. Legette plays 87% of the snaps. He looks like an every down player here with no Adam Thielen. Obviously, one of the reasons we took him was NFL talent evaluators were willing to sign off. They were willing to take him in round 1 of the NFL draft. He's a waiver wire name that you're getting at this point. Only rostered in 38% of leagues at the moment. 100% somebody that you should prioritize over everybody but Dontavian Wicks on the waiver wire. Now, going over to our next option, we're actually going to have Tucker Kraft. Now, with Tucker Kraft, if we want to get excited about this Packers offense with Jordan Love, obviously that includes every single position here. Tucker Kraft has cemented himself over Luke Musgrave. Now, through the first 4 weeks, we have 3 games where Tucker Kraft has played at least 80% of the snaps. This past week, he sees 9 targets in this offense. He has 53 receiving yards and 6 receptions as well. You get the receiving touchdown. I'm looking at my rest of season rankings on the site. I actually moved Tucker Kraft up to being a top 12 tight end. Like, I have Sam Laporta in the Flock League, and I probably will be betting on Tucker Kraft this week to, at the very minimum, be a spot start for me with Laporta's week 5 bye, but hopefully he continues to crush, and then I can potentially look to sell him after week 5. Josh Downs will be our next pickup with Josh Downs, obviously on the waiver wire video last week. And the reason he's behind Tucker Kraft for us is, while yes, this is a great week where we see the 9 targets, we see the 8 receptions, 82 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. He gives you a better week in week 4 than we have seen from Michael Pittman all season now. This is still going to be an offensive environment that wide receivers will not score fantasy points. As it stands right now, the reports that I'm reading, and of course this may be wrong, this may change, it does sound like you are going to have Anthony Richardson back in week 5. And as somebody who just traded for Anthony Richardson, I really hope he comes out here and crushes out. I really hope we see the rushing upside. But reasonably, I understand what to expect, right? We know with Anthony Richardson, we're not going to get passing volume. This is not going to be an offense that's near the top of the league in total passing yards, total passing attempts, total passing touchdowns. Actually, it's going to be at the very bottom in the NFL in all those categories with Anthony Richardson under center. And hopefully Anthony Richardson can just pick up first downs rushing the football, as well as get us those rushing touchdowns in fantasy, where that's not going to be well for any of the receivers. So I actually have Josh Downs ranked wide receiver 51. I have him directly behind guys like Cortland Sutton, Rashid Shaheed, and I'm directly ahead of guys like Wan'Dale Robinson and Romeo Doubs. Now, of course, Romeo Doubs will be the next guy on this list. If you're looking at Doubs, while yes, both Jayden Reed as well as Dontavian Wicks are the players to dominate this past week with no Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs could be a sneaky pickup where you go through and you look at the target share that you've had here. Back in week 1 with Jordan Love under center, Romeo Doubs led this team with 7 targets. This past week, Romeo Doubs had 8 targets in this offense as well. So this isn't a very black and white situation where we know, okay, yes, Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks are both going to be studs. They're going to get everything funneled through them. They're the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins in this offense. They're the Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle in this offense. No, it's very spread out. There are going to be a lot of players getting involved. And maybe that's why I'm quote unquote, I don't know if I'm lower or higher than other people with Dontavian Wicks at wide receiver 43, but that's why I'm not viewing Dontavian Wicks as I'm like locked and loaded top 24 starter going into the future, right? Because you do have these other secondary pieces, even without Christian Watson, that will be appealing, such as Dobbs. So if you can't get Wicks, Dobbs could be an appealing name. He hasn't scored a touchdown this year, but we know that we've had a decent touchdown rate with him in the past. I have him ranked wide receiver 53, directly behind someone like Wan'Dale Robinson and directly ahead of somebody like Jerry Jeudy. Now going over to Jalen Polk. Jalen Polk will be the 6th best ad at wide receiver this week. You have a rookie wide receiver that we are going to continue to expect he improves as the season goes on. That's the baseline expectation with every rookie wide receiver in the NFL. And we actually see a career high snap rate for him with 83%. You see the career high targets with 7 targets, career high receptions with 3, career high yards with 30. Now in a vacuum, are we super excited about 3 receptions for 30 receiving yards and 6 fantasy points? Probably not, right? But looking at the underlying volume metrics, plus the fact that we like this rookie profile coming out, I think if you're in a deeper league, definitely worth the roster spot. Right now, he's only rostered in 20% of leagues at the moment. And there is an outside chance that Drake May comes in the second half of this season, and Drake May does look serviceable, or at least a slightly better than Jacoby Brissett. Obviously, it'd be hard to expect May to quote unquote save this situation when we know the vast majority of these struggles come from the fact that it's just a team that is severely lacking talent across the board with the roster, particularly with the offensive line. But I think Jalen Polk's one of the few exceptions that you have here. I currently have Jalen Polk ranked at wide receiver 68, right behind guys like Ricky Pearsall, Allen Lazard, and right ahead of players like Jordan Whittington and Brandon Cooks. Now with Jordan Whittington, let's talk about him and Tutu Atwell. These are the 2 names that we would be looking at for the starting wide receiver jobs in Los Angeles. Jordan Whittington plays 97% of the snaps this week. Tutu Atwell plays 90% of the snaps this week. These are the 2 players that you want over Demarcus Robinson, over Tyler Johnson. I will let you know that I actually had a class with Jordan Whittington at UT way back in the day. I was actually like a junior. Somehow he went to UT as like a college senior. It was the spring semester. I look back, there's some 17-year-olds in my class with the rest of the football team going, okay, the man's a unit. I saw him walking around campus multiple times. Looks like a freaking linebacker. Obviously, your boy was a little bit taller, a little more muscular. By a little bit, I mean a lot, but still, I want to give the man his credit. You do have the 8 targets, 6 receptions, 62 receiving yards. You're the wide receiver 1 for Stafford. I mean, if you're not, Tutu Atwell is. I would only really be interested in super deep formats. I have Whittington wide receiver 69. I have Tutu Atwell wide receiver 73 in my rest of season ranks, but they would be a little bit higher in my weekly rankings, of course. You'd have to consider the fact that this is a spot where Kupp could come back any week now. Now going over to Ricky Pearsall. If Leggett was not my most drafted player on Underdog at wide receiver, it should be Sticky Ricky. Obviously, a lot of that was to do with us thinking Ayuk was going to get dealt, but nonetheless, I actually still don't mind the price around wide receiver 70. And looking at him coming into this Niners offense, it is going to be a very difficult path to get on the field. Ayuk has the $120 million contract. Deebo Samuel's a stud. Juwan Jennings is playing out of his mind. So honestly, with Sticky Ricky here, I probably don't want to throw him on my roster just yet. Maybe you're more so going to be looking to throw him on your watch list. If we see anything, we want to pick him up. If we get an injury to another receiver here, which obviously we've already had the injuries to Kittle and to Deebo so far this season, then at that point, we go ahead and we look to add him. But ultimately, he is a round 1 NFL talent that goes to what should be one of the best offenses in the NFL. Going over to our next option, we're going to have Mike Williams. Now, in this game against Denver, we see Mike Williams actually have a season-high 5 targets, a season-high 4 receptions, a season-high 67 receiving yards, and a game with horrible weather, where obviously Aaron Rodgers was not able to be an efficient quarterback in this environment. It was disgusting. And going into the future, you could potentially expect Mike Williams to leapfrog Allen Lazard as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Based off the large sample that we have from these receivers, I would be a little more confident starting Williams than I would be Lazard, even if Lazard's been better this season. And obviously the expectation was that, Mike Williams is going to start a little bit slower given the fact that he is the guy coming off the torn ACL. And then going over to Trey Tucker, I know that it may be crazy to have Trey Tucker this low on this list, and I know y'all probably will prioritize other players ahead of him. I more so just want to be a little cautious and let everybody know that 1, Devontae Adams may come back. 2, I still expect Jacoby Myers to be the wide receiver ahead of Trey Tucker. 3, I still expect Brock Bowers to see more target volume. So if Adams is healthy, Trey Tucker's the number 4 option in a very bad offense. If Brock Bowers is injured, I think Trey Tucker's the number 3 option in a very bad offense. Now, obviously, he's been really good this season. You've had back-to-back games now with over 15 fantasy points. You've had back-to-back games now with over 80% of the snaps. But I don't know. I'm not trusting it. I know a lot of other people that are smarter than me. Maybe they will. But I think that's all I got for you. I really hope that I was able to help you out. And of course, hit that like, subscribe if you play fantasy football. And if you play fantasy football, I know all those tools that we made on flockfantasy.com will help you out a ton. Take advantage of the trade calculator. Take advantage of the trade finder. Go link your team if you're playing on ESPN, Sleeper, or on Yahoo. It's completely free, all of that. Plus, you can check out our rest of season ranks, our dynasty ranks. You can find that link in the description as well as the comment section. But I really do appreciate you. Really hope that you have a great day and hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.